The cage was latched. They were certain of it, which is why finding Echo on the crib rail at 3:14 a.m. was the first of several things that night that made no sense. Echo was a 12-year-old African gray parrot, a bird whose vocabulary was extensive and whose personality ranged from sardonic to contemplative, depending on the hour. He had been in the family for 9 years, before the marriage, before the house, long before Willa arrived. He was not a sentimental animal. He was observational, precise, and in the specific way of African grays, attentive to patterns in ways that sometimes made his owners feel quietly evaluated. He had been quiet for 3 months. This was the other thing. Before Willa came home, Echo had been vocal in the typical way. Morning sounds, interactive commentary when people spoke in his presence, the occasional unprompted phrase delivered with the timing of someone who had been waiting for the right moment. After Willa arrived, something changed. Not hostility, not fear. A kind of focused quiet. He watched the baby from his enclosure with the same systematic attention he brought to everything. And he did not make much noise. Her parents, James and Serena, had been monitoring her more closely than usual, checking the monitor more often, waking to sounds that in other weeks they would have slept through. By Wednesday, they were both tired in the specific depleting way of parents who have been on light alert for 7 days. They went to bed at 10:30. James was asleep within minutes. Serena woke at 3:14 a.m. to a sound she could not immediately identify. It was Echo, but not the sounds he usually made. Not vocabulary, not the ambient noises of a bird moving in its cage. It was a sustained vocalization she had never heard from him in 9 years. A repetitive rhythmic call. Not loud, but insistent. The kind of sound that does not stop. She got up. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. She walked down the hallway to the nursery. The door was ajar. She opened it. Echo was on the crib rail. He was standing with both feet gripping the rail at the side of the crib, his body angled over Willa, making the rhythmic call in the direction of the infant. She reached into the crib. Willa's skin was very cold. Her color was off. Her breathing was present, but shallow, and had the specific rhythm of labored air movement through still congested airways. Each breath slightly longer than the last, slightly less complete. Serena picked her up and called for James. The paramedic who arrived was a man named Douglas Ferreira. 11 years in emergency response, he assessed Willa in the living room, noted her oxygen saturation, and made the call immediately. At the hospital, the emergency physician, Dr. Adez Ume, explained what had been happening. The viral respiratory infection had not fully resolved. The remaining inflammation in the upper airway, combined with the passive position of an infant in deep sleep, had been producing a progressive reduction in airflow across the night. The oxygen saturation level at which they brought her in, 88%. Normal is 95 to 100. At 88, the brain begins compensating in ways that escalate. The presenting symptoms in a sleeping infant at this saturation level are subtle, Dr. Ume said. The color change, the breathing pattern. A parent who wasn't looking for it could sleep through the early stage. The window between early stage compensation and crisis in an infant is not long. She looked at James. What woke you? Serena answered, the parrot. Dr. Ume was quiet for a moment. Has your dog or bird ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. African gray parrots are documented to detect changes in respiratory rate and pattern. They are sensitive to subtle audio shifts in the breathing of people they cohabit with. Echo had been in a room 30 feet from the nursery, behind the latched cage door, and had detected a change in Willa's breathing that neither monitor nor sleeping parent had registered. The cage latch, the family later found, had a worn mechanism that Echo had apparently learned to work, a finding that, in the context of everything else, felt less like an escape and more like a decision. The technician who inspected the baby monitor found that the unit's sensitivity had been inadvertently set to the lowest range during a setting reset 6 days earlier. It would not have triggered on shallow breathing. Echo had no such threshold. Willa came home the following day, improved, with a pulse oximeter clipped to her small foot and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the week after. James reinstalled the nursery monitor at maximum sensitivity. He also repaired the cage latch. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. That evening, he stood in the doorway of the living room, watching Echo in his enclosure. The bird was quiet again, the same focused quiet of the past. 3 months, watching the house with his particular attentiveness. James said, "Good boy, Echo." Echo turned his head and looked at him for a moment. Then he turned back to the nursery doorway and continued watching. The next story is about a dog who lay beside a sleeping newborn every night for 6 weeks, and the night he finally moved away from the crib, and what that meant.